I want to tell you about the moment I stopped trusting the official explanation. I was sitting in a research library in Prague, flipping through architectural surveys from the 19th century, when I stopped at a photograph of a church in Kazan, Russia, dated around 1860. I stared at it because I had seen that exact church before. Not a similar church built in the same tradition, but that exact church. The same proportions, the same tower rising at the same angle, the same arcade running along the facade, and the same blind niches carved into stone at the same height. I had seen it in an architectural survey from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, recorded a decade earlier. I sat there for a long time staring at those two photographs, and then I started asking questions that I haven't been able to stop asking since. The official history of Western architecture is presented to us as a neat, reassuring progression. We learned about the Greeks, the Romans, the Dark Ages, the Romanesque period, the Gothic era, the Renaissance, and Neoclassicism. Every building is supposed to fit neatly into its cultural context, tied to a known architect, a local patron, and a specific moment in time. But when you travel across continents, take actual measurements, and compare these structures side by side, that smooth narrative begins to crumble. You encounter a global pattern that standard history simply fails to address. Look at St. Olaf's in Tallinn, Estonia, or St. Mary's in Krakow, Poland. Up to a point, regional trade routes and shared European networks can explain their structural similarities. But then you travel thousands of kilometers further east to Odessa or Perm, and then across the Atlantic to Trinity Church in New York City, the Cathedral Basilica in Philadelphia, Christ Church in Montreal, and the Cathedral of Buenos Aires. These are not merely buildings inspired by European tastes. They share matching proportions, aligning facade ratios, identical tower-to-nave scales, and cornice profiles that carry across vast oceans with unnerving accuracy. How do structures built thousands of miles apart by regional craftsmen with no documented long-distance communication networks conform to a shared geometric logic with such precision? The conventional answer is always neoclassicism and the circulation of pattern books by architects like Palladio or Vignola. But architectural manuals suggest general principles. They do not dictate identical idiosyncratic details across different hemispheres. A pattern book might tell you to use a Corinthian column, but it cannot explain why a cathedral in Russia and a church in Pennsylvania share non-standard tower fenestrations and identical cornice rhythms that do not appear in any standard reference text. Consider the proportional relationships governing these buildings. In Samara, on the Volga River, the Catholic Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception features twin towers where the ratio between tower width, spire pitch, and door height follows a precise geometric formula. Apply that same mathematical formula to St. Joseph's Cathedral in Bardstown, Kentucky, or to old cathedrals in Chile, Peru, and Uruguay, and the signature aligns almost perfectly, well within margins smaller than natural material variation. When you ask conventional historians about these mathematical coincidences, the conversation drifts into hand-waving about shared classical inspiration. Yet when you try to trace the lineage from master to apprentice, the historical paper trail vanishes or turns contradictory. An unsettling number of these structures suffer from missing records, fires that conveniently destroyed municipal archives between 1780 and 1870, or foundation stones that conflict with official construction dates by decades. In some cases, photographic surveys depict massive stone cathedrals fully constructed and weathered years before their official municipal groundbreaking dates. In cities like Lviv, ancient churches share precise astronomical alignments where their declinations correspond to sunrise on specific dates in late autumn, dates with deep cosmological meaning that predate Christian traditions. When you examine the foundations of these 19th-century buildings, you frequently find a clear stone discontinuity. At basement level, the stonework changes in dressing, precision, and material, revealing that 19th-century builders frequently constructed upward from pre-existing foundations they did not lay themselves. Between 1750 and 1900, an astonishing volume of massive stone infrastructure appeared across the globe. Cathedrals, capitals, state libraries, courthouses, and train stations. We're told this monumental building spree was accomplished by a newly industrializing society that was still relying primarily on horse-drawn transportation and lacked modern logistics. Look at Melbourne, Australia. In 1840, it was recorded as a tiny settlement of tents and wooden huts. By 1880, it boasted grand stone public buildings that rivaled the architecture of Paris and London, sharing identical central hall ratios and decorative schemes with the Palais Trocadero and London's Natural History Museum. This global phenomenon points to something the modern record ignores: the possibility of a widespread, highly sophisticated architectural tradition, a civilization or network often associated with the cartographic label Tartaria. On 17th and 18th century maps, vast swaths of northern and central Asia were labeled Great Tartary. Rather than empty wilderness, the architectural footprint across Siberia, the Volga region, and overseas colonies suggests a shared body of technical knowledge in geometry, astronomy, and stonemasonry that spanned the northern hemisphere before modern borders were drawn. This shared language extended beyond structural physics into symbolic decoration. The chevrons, rope moldings, and solar emblems found in medieval Dublin or Novgorod reappear identically on 16th-century stone portals in Quito, Ecuador, and churches in Yaroslavl. Instead of showing the slow, hybrid steps of cultural diffusion, these symbols appear fully formed simultaneously across distant continents, as if a single cosmological vocabulary was already embedded worldwide. Then, around the late 19th century, this monumental stone building tradition abruptly stopped. It was replaced by smaller structures, steel frame construction, and modernism. Simultaneously, state institutions consolidated land registries, standardized building records, and wrote the official historical narrative, attributing pre-existing stone monuments to recent frontier builders on empty land. Throughout history, advanced bodies of knowledge have been lost, from Roman concrete to ancient astronomical records. What we view as a 19th-century building boom may actually be the story of a newer civilization inheriting the stone remnants of an older one, redocumenting those structures and writing itself into their history. Once you see this pattern in stone running from Russia to Peru, Australia, and the American frontier, you cannot unsee it. Standing in front of these silent monuments, the question remains: who truly cut that stone, and whose history is written into these walls?